Recorded live from the heart of the Bakken, it's the Williston Works Podcast.
Welcome to the Williston Works Podcast, brought to you by the City of Williston. Williston Works brings you in-depth discussions with the entrepreneurs, small business owners, and investors who are getting it done in Williston, North Dakota. I'm your host, Sean Wenko, Executive Director of Williston Economic Development, and today's guest, we have Ian and Tricia Anderson, and they're the owners of Pronghorn Well Service. Great to have you guys on the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
You know, we talk about the podcast, you know, when we're in our fourth season of development here with the podcast, and how it started is it's an outreach to entrepreneurs like yourself that have been very successful in business in Williston and the surrounding area. And you know, we sit down and we talk to you about, you know, what you've seen, what are some of the ups and downs and challenges that you've seen, because our outreach to entrepreneurs and developers that are out there that are maybe thinking of pull the trigger. We want them to hear it from the people that are here and getting it done. So again, we really appreciate, you know, what you've done for businesses. But before we get into Pronghorn Well Service, you know, I want to get a little bit of your background, because you know, we talked about this prior to going live on the podcast here, but you're not necessarily, you know, we're not necessarily a native of Williston, but you pretty much are, you know, because you know, you grew up not that far.
Right. Plentywood, Montana, a whopping 84 miles away, I believe, is where we both graduated from high school. And I've lived in Williston for, well, my daughter's 23, so 23 years now. And Ian's joined us in the last 5
years been here. So.
And Ian, you said you came from Antelope?
Yep.
Okay, correct. And what brought you out here to Williston area?
Her. Yeah.
That's about how it goes quite a bit.
Yeah.
And started in, so we talked about, you came out, we were talking previously, you started in the oil and gas industry, correct?
Yep.
And then, and Tricia, what was your background?
I have an accounting degree.
Okay.
So after graduation, I went to college in Phoenix and then had my first child and wanted my mother, really. So moved as close as, you know, I found my first job as actually here in town at an accounting firm, and been here ever since. Well,
getting into now Pronghorn Well Service, tremendously successful company that the two of you have started. Listening to your story, Ian, is really comical in a way, because it's about how it goes, how a business comes to be. I'm going to let you tell it. I mean, start to the point of when you started working in the oil and gas industry, and what led up to finally talking to Tricia and saying, hey, look what we're going to do.
Oh, Lord. Well, I went to work on a drilling rig in 1997 when I was 18 years old. You know, at that time, the oil field had a very poor reputation, but I had bills to pay, and that was, I guess, a means to an end. And I soon, you know, became quite enthralled by the horsepower of the equipment and the work, because, you know, at that time it was more of an art form than a factory type work. So, you know, I mean, I rode that career for over 20 years through ups and downs around the entire world, you know, trying to stay employed. It wasn't uncommon to work in 5 different states in the same year, and it wasn't because it was lucrative. It was just the only way you could stay alive.
Right.
You know, and I had quite a bit of success in the drilling industry, but you know, I guess a lot of the true drilling people, we weren't as excited for the Bakken oil boom to happen as the investors and business owners and bankers and the accountants, because we want nothing more than to just stay working our whole lives. But when it got to be 137 rigs or whatever in the state of North Dakota, you know, and oil started crashing in 2013, it's like, what's next? You know, we were, you know, at the time, the well spacing wasn't quite where it is. And, you know, when you hear oil companies talk about how many years until their inventory is drilled up, well, you know, at that time I was pushing 40 or whatever. And, you know, how much more do you want to keep doing it? Right.
Right.
So then, you know, you kind of got to look beyond that. And then 2016 happened. And I'd run out of work for the first time in my life, really. And the only thing I could do, I guess, was get a job on a workover rig, out of love for the industry and opening up avenues, gaining more education about what's going on. So yeah, no, I went to work on a workover rig, and she's pretty smart. So we started talking about the numbers, and somehow I convinced her that this was a good idea.
What was that thought? What was that like? I would have loved to have been a mouse in the corner. He comes home, he's like, hey, we're going to start a business. We're going to buy workover rigs.
Oh, my answer's always no, with his ideas first. It takes about 20 tries for him to get his way. He always gets his way. But I think his biggest thing was, if I'm ever going to have to work on a workover rig again, I want to own it.
Sure.
So I think that seed was planted, and then it kind of trickled over, through the next couple of years. And I think one day in 2018, probably the spring of 2018, he's like, maybe we should buy it. And I'm like, maybe we should. I think I finally conceded on try 20.
Well, let's roll back quick for the listeners, because I think you'll have some listeners that they think everything is just a rig that's drilling out there. The definition of a workover rig.
Well servicing. Once with anything requires maintenance, any machine, right? So you drill it and you frack it, and this oil comes out of the ground, and it's a miracle. But it doesn't stay that way forever. And then you have to start lowering pumps into the hole to bring the oil to the surface. Well, there's a lot of moving parts and electrical components to these pumps. And just like anything else, they fail, right? So a smaller rig, a more mobile, less horsepower rig goes out there and repairs the pumps, retrieves the pumps and then replaces it. So yeah, like it takes like 10 days to drill a well with a drilling rig. Well, that's, a $25 million investment for 10 days, the cost of that rig. Well, a workover rig costs, $1 million. But throughout the life of a well, a workover rig will probably be out there 200 times, at 3 days at a whack. So it's a better return on investment, and it's a more long-term picture looking forward of what needs to be here in North Dakota, we think.
Well, and I think you had made that comment, average life of a well is about 30 years,
Yep.
Give or take, correct? I mean, They start out very, very strong, and then they just decline very rapidly. And then that's when the workover comes in, like you said, 200 times over the life of a well.
Yeah.
Because it's going to have some work done to it.
Yeah.
And so that's, really what you guys are focused on,
Yep.
On the Pronghorn side. So getting back to when you talked about you guys are going to start this business, it starts with a business plan. What did that process look like? I know you had met with Keith Olson.
Keith Olson was awesome to meet with. And I've worked with him in the past through my, past employment, and he's always been great. And so he really just sat down with me. We built a budget together, something that I could present to the bank. He helped me through all the numbers, all the expectations.
Excellent.
And from that point, I submitted it to a couple banks and chose to go with First National Bank at the time, which is now First State Bank. And Chris Junt has been with me kind of along the way, and just kind of really helped to build that. And, the first rig we went through SBA, so then it was a 10% upfront cost rather than a normal 25%. So, that's a great program that the state
Yep.
provides as well. It's a lot of paperwork, a lot of hoops to go through, but so worth it.
And referring to SBA, when you say 10%, that is a tremendous program. I believe they call it the 504, which is a 50-40-10, 10% off the borrower some. But it's a way to get into something of a large purchase, for a relatively small amount of money. It's
Right.
still 10%, but it kind of helps with businesses. So you get the financing lined up. You guys purchase this first. Workover rig. Tell me about day one. What was it like? Pronghorn well service.
Wow. Yeah, let's see. We brought it up here. We hired a couple guys to go get it, and it was, they're not designed to drive from Oklahoma to North Dakota. We rigged it up in a borrowed yard, and our first doghouse trailer that we built was an old utility trailer we bought in an alley. We insulated it and built shelves in it.
That was our first project together.
It was our first project together. You know, we had some good employees, and we put it together on a shoestring budget, you know, with all good stuff. And there was a lot of surprises. You know, there's a lot of components involved in the whole picture, right? And to get 100% on that preparation test I still haven't quite got there yet, but we're close now.
When you talk about the first rig, what did that start with employees? So how many did you start with initially?
With the rotation that we were on, we had 6 employees to start.
Okay.
And then we kind of needed a half a person to fill in that time. So we hired 6 to start. And we still actually have 3 of those first initial people. So,
which is really good because, I mean, you've talked about this. I think the number one thing is what we're seeing in economic development is workforce development.
For
I'm
sure.
hearing from a lot of the companies. I mean, there's just the demand for workforce is off the charts. And especially in your guys' industry, I mean, the turnover is just, it's huge. And so to have that, I mean, that's very good.
Yes.
You know, to see 3 from the initial. But you did 6, and then, you know, I know you had mentioned, I mean, the goal was to get to 5 rigs, correct? That's
Correct.
the goal with Pronghorn. You got the first rig. You purchased the second one soon after.
The following summer of 2019.
Things were good. Let's talk about the third rig because that didn't go as well.
That didn't go as well. Yeah, things were looking good. 2 rigs. We're like, okay, we have enough savings to make another down payment. As an accountant, do you decide, do you pay off a rig or do you keep going? And we kind of decided we'll just jump in and keep going. So it was probably January. We ordered rig 3 of 2020. And, you know, it takes them, you know, a little time to build it and get it ready to go. We wrote it here, shows up March 9th, 2020. And that week, everything dumped just like crazy. And it was eye-opening. So one of the other reasons we chose work oversight is because it's more of a consistent oil field, right? Yep. You're going to always have repairs and maintenance. That didn't happen. This was probably the first time ever they were turning off wells instead of fixing them.
Yep.
You know,
and that was just really due to such a drop in the price.
Absolutely.
I mean, for the listeners there, they just were shutting wells in because it just, economically, I mean,
and that one day they hit like negative, was it
Negative
$38?
$37.20.
Yeah. How does that even happen?
That was a terrible day for Williston Economic Development. I will tell you that right now. I mean, that was a terrible day. But you know, we bounced back, and that's one thing too. I mean, you look at what you guys did with your business, because we saw this a lot with all the businesses in Williston. You know, it forced my office to do kind of a style of economic development I don't like to do, and it's play defense. We always like to be on offense, but we were just doing a lot of patch and maintain. It was just calling businesses, you know, saying, you okay, you know, trying to get them connected to CARES Act money and stuff like that, just to limit the losses as much as we can. And it sounds like you guys did that. I mean, you just tightened everything up and you kind of limped it through the period. But now, I mean, rig 3 is out there, correct?
Rig 3 went out to work in September.
Excellent.
Yeah. And I will say one thing about the oil companies. They were pretty loyal. Like our first 2, we were the last rigs to go, first ones picked up. And a lot of the companies, like when we were looking for rig 3 work, you know, they were yes. And when everything dropped, they picked up their companies that worked for them already. And that's the way it should be. And so there's a lot of loyalty out there, and that's really a good thing.
You know, it's a good point to bring up because I get a lot of those questions from people who call. They want to do something in the oil and gas industry. And the first thing I tell them is, well, you got to have boots on the ground here. And you've got to have some relationships here. I mean, you're just not going to pick up a phone and get work. And then I say, you know, get boots on the ground, get a contract, you know, try and get that initial contract, do a great job, and then it's going to kind of go from there.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. Once you get those relationships, those are your referrals. And you can't get another contract unless you have that.
Yep, absolutely. So with 3 rigs running, where are you at with employees now?
We're at currently 23 employees. And adding this 4th rig, we'll go to work tomorrow, actually.
Oh, so we have number 4 coming.
Number 4.
Okay.
Actually, Ian got to drive his first rig home from Oklahoma himself last week.
An arduous task.
With no air conditioning and, you know, almost 100-degree heat.
So you got to 4. So, I mean, by all indications, you guys are going to hit your goal of 5, correct? What is there like a time frame you're pushing for to see that goal or see that realization?
I don't think I had a time frame in my head. It seems to be one every year, but I'm hoping that we're going to pay off a little debt before you get number
Yeah.
5, but you never know.
No, we'd rather put quality of work before
Yeah.
growth.
Yeah.
I think that's where I'm at with it. You know, I don't want to sacrifice what we do just for the sake of
Right.
volume.
Right.
And I think we did it because we had the opportunity for work coming and we knew the timing was right more than anything.
Yeah.
So we kind of that's why we took advantage of Rig 4 right now.
So, a couple final questions for you. When we talk about, you look at Williston, what does the future of Williston look like for Pronghorn Well Service and, for you as individuals?
Well, I do believe that the oil economy will remain strong for an extended period of time. And I mean, though, it's going to be here for the rest of our lifetimes. Beyond that, who's to say? But for us, I mean, we're bonded, to the community. We're going to be here. We're not going to, sell out to some angel investor and light off to, Mexico or anything like that. We're here. This is home.
It's just funny because there's something about Williston that I hear it time and time again, and I am one of them myself too. There's a draw here, and I was born and raised here. I moved away, I came back, and there's just a draw here. It's a great place to raise a family, and I always say all the time, opportunity. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity. Mm-hmm. You want to work hard. You want to have a vision. I think the opportunity is here for the entrepreneurs. Looking back on Pronghorn, if you had a chance to say something, if there's an entrepreneur out there listening, what advice would you give them if they're thinking about starting their business in North Dakota?
Jump in. I mean, do the legwork. It's not an easy task. There's a lot of details and a lot of things to round up, but it's worth it. I mean, there's stressful days. There's highs and lows. We ride a roller coaster, right? But what job doesn't? I mean, no matter what job you do, whether you own it or you're an employee, if you do your best job and you work hard, you're going to succeed. And, there's things that come up that you can't. I mean, COVID, who knew? Oil crashing, who knew?
Yep.
If that would have went bad and we would have lost it all, you start over, So we took the chance, and it could still go bad. We can't foresee what the economy is going to do, but it's a chance we're willing to take.
Any final thoughts? Anything you guys would like to add to the podcast today?
I agree about Williston. It's a place of opportunity. I mean, it really is. How many places in this country can you go and do something like this? I mean, I'll admit there's a higher cost of living here, but there's a higher opportunity as well. And I think they go hand in hand.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, Ian and Tricia Anderson, owners of Pronghorn Well Service, again, I appreciate what you guys are doing for the community. Here's to many years of success for you, and we thank you for being on season 4 here of the Williston Works podcast.
Thank you for having us.
And also, thanks for listening to today's episode of the Williston Works podcast. It's brought to you by the City of Williston. Please like and subscribe for more interviews and content. And to learn more about Williston, North Dakota, visit cityofwilliston.com. I'm Sean Wenko, Executive Director of the Williston Economic Development Office, and we will see you next podcast.